Romulan warbird decloaking directly ahead. They are powering weapons.
Shields up, red alert. Prepare phasers.
In this video, we're going to go through everything about the new cloaking mechanic in Stellaris First Contact. We're going to go through the technologies, what it means, what you can do with it, and how you can detect it and counter it. Not only that, but thanks to Developer Diary 289, we're also going to be looking at the 4 new civics coming with Stellaris First Contact. Those civics are actually amazing. We are going to get new subspace drives. Yes, that is correct, you heard me right, a different type of FTL travel than hyperdrive. On top of that, each of these civics will mean you do not start the game with hyperdrive, and if you don't want to, you never have to research hyperdrive technology all game long. A staple of science fiction that has long been missing from Stellaris is the ability to have fleets and stations capable of being cloaked and hiding from enemy sensors. With the addition of awareness and improvements to interactions with pre-FTL civilizations, the developers felt that First Contact was the right place and the right time to explore how cloaking could be added to the game in a meaningful way, tying into warfare, exploration, and espionage. When the devs set out to design the cloaking and counter-cloaking systems, their goals were simple. Science ships should be able to equip cloaking devices to allow exploration of space regardless of if another empire has closed their borders to you. Observation posts should be capable of being hidden from the pre-FTL civilizations they were observing. Military vessels should be capable of cloaking, but with some limitations. Cloaking should be balanced such that it is better to cloak frigates or cruisers than battleships. Cloaking should also interact with the existing espionage system in some way. But how does all of that work in practice? So how does all of this work in practice? Well, cloaking field generators are a new type of ship component that is limited to 1 per ship, and it occupies either an auxiliary slot if that ship is designable by the player, so that is your regular corvettes, cruisers and that like, or a special cloaking device slot for undesignable ships, for example science ships or observation posts. The first cloaking devices available can only be equipped on corvettes, frigates, science ships and observation posts. As technology improves, so does the cloaking strength provided by cloaking devices, as well as the size of ship that they are capable of cloaking. Here we can see the first technology basic cloaking fields, which, as we've heard, unlocks cloaking for corvettes, frigates and selected civilian ships. This also, from what we're going to find out later, gives us level 1 cloaking. And we've seen there are at least 5 levels in the cloaking UI that has been shown to us so far. After that first basic level, there are 2 more levels that I believe we can research easily: advanced cloaking fields and the elite cloaking fields. These unlock cloaking for destroyers and then cruisers respectively. Also, I'm pretty sure these are the last cloaking technologies we can get without some external intervention. And the reason I say that is that the last 2 technologies do not have a number on them, and they are dark matter cloaking fields and psi-phase field generators. Clearly, one of these we might be getting from a fallen empire, and the other might be a psionic only technology. A further buff to psionic ascension, which they may not really need if you ask me. The dark matter cloaks let you have cloaked battleships and titans, whereas the psi-phase field generators unlock the same and offer the best cloaking strength in the game. Not only that, they enable us to do some fancy things with shields as well, as we'll get to see a little later. While cloaked, your ships and fleets can ignore closed borders and cannot be detected by normal sensors. This can be useful for a variety of reasons, such as having science ships explore and survey systems that might otherwise have been blocked off to you in order to research anomalies, or possibly complete a special project inside the borders of your rivals, or getting well-armed fleets situated to ambush an enemy starbase upon war declaration. Cloaked science ships will also have another trick up their sleeves, being able to perform covert reconnaissance on colonized planets to gather intel on other empires, and increasing the speed at which this intel is gained. Finally, cloaked fleets and observation posts can't be seen by pre-FTL civilizations, so using them will minimize your chances of accidentally increasing their awareness. As we can see from this image, there is a cloaked ship, I believe at level 5 cloaking, which is fearsomely strong cloaking technology. They are performing active reconnaissance, which not only increases intel gathering speed, that's intel from the espionage screen, by 10%, but also boosts our base level of intel by 20. I think that could mean if we have 4 science ships, 4 or 5 of these things, we could stack this intel from active reconnaissance up to a maximum of 100 pretty darn easily, though of course we will be required to have the science ships for it. I must admit, I am really excited by all of these additions to not necessarily the espionage system, but the intel system and the intel gathering system. That is something that has been worked on and tweaked and fiddled around quite a bit since we had it released with Stellaris Nemesis, and intel, especially military intel, is more important now than ever before. And if you're enjoying this video, please decloak that like button. Due to the power draw and manipulation of particle fields, cloaking imposes penalties on the shields of ships while cloaked, depending on the type of cloaking device being equipped. Ships equipped with a basic, advanced or elite cloaking field generator suffer from 100% shield nullification while cloaked. And I must admit, I love how thematically Star Trek that is. You can either have your ship cloaked or you can have it shielded. Ships equipped with the dark matter cloaking field generator have a reduced penalty of 50% shield nullification, and ships with the psi-phase field generator, that's the psionic cloak, and any regular shields suffer from 100% shield nullification, but if they have psionic shields or barriers only and no regular shields, they will not suffer from any shield nullification while cloaked. As a little spoiler for patch 3.7 as well, the devs would like to note that as of the 3.7 Canis Minor update, both shield nullification and armor nullification have had a slight change. Now, I have no idea what armor nullification is, and I'm completely terrified. I don't think we've seen that before. Comment down below if we have and I'm being very forgetful, but I'm fairly confident we've only ever had shield nullification from space weather and that sort of thing. Previously though, if a ship suffered from 100% shield nullification, for example due to being in a pulsar system, and then the nullification was removed, I don't know, say leaving the system, their shields would instantly jump back up to full strength. Now, however, this has been changed so the fleet has to restore shields back to full capacity via their regular shield regeneration, meaning once you leave a pulsar, your ship's shields don't automatically go back up again. Instead, they do have to go back up naturally over time, providing an enemy with ample opportunity to swoop in and attack. So each of these cloaking components, whilst as they get better and more advanced, can be equipped on bigger and bigger ships, starting with corvettes and going all the way up to your battleships and titans. Note they can never be put on Colossus or Juggernauts. That is specifically something they cannot go on, apparently. But anyway, note that as they go up on those larger ships, the actual effectiveness of the cloaks gets worse and worse. What this table is showing us is that a dark matter cloak on a corvette will be at maximum cloaking strength of 4, whereas the same cloak on a battleship will only be strength 1, which I believe means that battleships will be much harder to cloak and much more easily detectable. Whereas if you have a psi-phase cloak on a frigate, that's going to be nigh impossible to detect at a whopping level 5. So the cloaking strength of a fleet is determined by the ship in that fleet with the lowest possible cloak strength. That means that you probably won't want to have a fleet full of corvettes that have, say, a Titan attached to them that are required to cloak. The best outcome for your cloaked ships will be to go mono-hull fleets, all of the same type. That way you're not suffering from the lower cloaked strength of the larger vessels. In order to be able to cloak, all ships in the fleet must be capable of cloaking as well. Yet that does kind of seem like a no-brainer. How well a fleet can cloak is described by the stability of the cloaking field of a fleet, and can range from non-existent to exceptional depending on the cloaking strength of that fleet. This stability, or strength, factors into both how easily a starbase can detect or reveal the cloaked fleet, more on this apparently later, and what penalties, if any, that fleet may suffer. It's worth also keeping in mind that as the cloaking strength of a fleet is determined by the ship with the lowest cloaking strength in that fleet, a fleet of mixed battleships and corvettes will have a lower cloaking strength and be easily detected, much more easily, than a fleet solely comprised of corvettes, literally as I mentioned earlier. The highest level of cloaking strength and the corresponding cloaking field stability obtainable purely by ship components is 5 or very high. You can reach higher strengths. In order to reach strength 6 or greater, and thus the various grades of exceptional stability, your fields will require additional sources of cloaking strength, such as finishing subterfuge traditions or hiding in a nebula. Wow, so depending on the space weather we have at our disposal, we will be able to manipulate our cloaks to be better and better, and also it sounds like taking subterfuge will be buffed as of patch 3.7. It'll be doing all of the spying things it's used to do. It will be doing the bonuses in terms of our tracking and evasion additions, but also it's going to improve how well we can cloak, which may mean that we now have to pick at least 2, if not 3, war-based traditions. That is supremacy, also now possibly subterfuge, and then, if you're a fan of it, unyielding. And then we get to this interesting table. This table tells us about cloaking strength levels and associated penalties, because there are penalties you get when you are cloaked. So, at a cloaking strength of 0, i.e. non-existent, there's no penalties, however, you cannot cloak. Fair enough. At a strength of 1, which is basically the maximum for a battleship unless you've got space weather or something going on, you'll get a minus 50% sublight speed modifier, meaning your already slow fleet of battleships will be going astronomically slower. On top of that, all FTL jumps will be 2.25 times slower to charge up. So if you have a cloaked fleet of battleships, yes, it's possible the enemy might not see them, but it'll take you a long time to get wherever you're going. I suspect it might be the case, and I don't know yet how the cloaking UI will work for active anti-cloaking measures, but it might be better to leave a fleet of battleships apparently cloaked, even though we've detected them, without breaking their cloaks, because they suffer from such massive sublight speed reductions as well as FTL wind-up reductions. On top of that, don't forget, we already know that they're going to have massively reduced shields, probably completely off unless they have dark matter cloaking. So cloaking battleships is probably going to be a very risky proposition. What amazes me about this table though is we can get all the way up to level 10 cloaking. At level 6 and above, I guess maybe it's kind of super cloaking, exceptional. We not only in the UI, we get an additional layer. So we're going to have levels 0 to 5, and then we get levels 6 to 10 just layered on top of that. But you'll have no sublight speed reduction, as well as no FTL speed reduction either. It does require these additional sources as mentioned. We do get to see what some of these sources are though. Let's move on to the next slide. Here we have a UNE science ship led by Herbert Appleby, apparently a member of the Wolf Pack, and this science ship is making use of a nebula to boost their cloaking strength. They're at +5 from their cloaking field generator. I assume it's the psi generator, though this isn't a psionic pop, so confusion. And then they're getting an additional +3 from the nebula. This fleet is capable of projecting an exceptionally stable cloaking field without any limitations on sublight speed and hyper jump charge time. Further improvements will allow the fleet to evade detection from increasingly advanced detection arrays. So probably having a detection array in a nebula system is completely pointless. And that brings us on quite nicely to the next point, which is how we actually detect these cloaked vessels. In order to be detected or revealed, a fleet needs to be within sensor range of an enemy starbase with a detection strength equal to or greater than the cloaking strength of the fleet. Detection strength is normally gained by building detection array modules on a starbase, though certain rare technologies can unlock buildings or orders for science ships to further increase this. And I think we've seen one of these orders. We have seen a science ship that has the order to assist cloaking detection. I'm not sure if we can use multiple science ships to stack that, but if we can, that might make, along with some of the other uses we've seen for science ships in here, science ships more useful than ever. As you can see from the image, they've also rearranged the Starbase UI to list various previously hidden modifiers. So when we look at this, we can see this Starbase has a detection strength of 3. That comes from 3 detection arrays, which I assume are the radar or sonar looking module that is in the module slot. And given that there are 3 of them, I'm feeling fairly confident about that. This does mean, given you can fit 6 modules on a starbase, the maximum detection strength with a starbase should in theory be 6 just with the modules alone. I believe there will be a building as well. The old listening post is probably going to do something along this vein with detection strength, probably, but we will have to see. Regardless of that, what we're probably going to see is that the choke point systems you have, now you have to choose. Do you build up the starbase to have a military presence, a bastion, lots of gun ports and that sort of stuff, maybe some hangar bays and torpedo bays, or instead, do you neglect the military capabilities of your starbase, rely on your fleet alone, and fill it with detection modules? If you're particularly paranoid about your neighbors, that might be a very, very good idea. Now, more than ever in Stellaris, I believe it would be a very good idea if we could do some sort of espionage mission or possibly unlock through the intel system somehow to know which technologies an opponent, or another empire I should say, they're not necessarily an opponent, a bit of a Freudian slip, but which technologies other empires have researched. That way we could know if they have the cloaking technology already, and thus if we know they have it, we can then tailor our defenses accordingly. So what happens when a fleet is detected by a starbase? Well, it is either detected or forced to decloak depending on these conditions. If the cloaked fleet is outside of your borders, you'll be able to see it with the cloaking visuals, but it won't be forced to decloak. However, if the cloaked fleet is inside of your borders, it will then be forced to decloak immediately. Also important to note, if a cloaked fleet is inside another empire's borders and thus not detected, when you declare war, it will not be forced to go MIA like a normal fleet would be. Whilst I do think it is a shame that you can't choose whether or not to break an enemy fleet's cloak, because maybe it's advantageous for them to think you don't know that they're there when you actually know, I think that it might be much simpler this way, the way they've designed it, because with this design, there is absolutely no ambiguity. As a player, you know if they can break your cloaking or not, because it will either be broken or it won't be. Now we get something that I really was not expecting at all, to be quite honest. I was expecting this even less than I expected the First Contact DLC to be announced whatsoever. And let me tell you, I was definitely shocked when it was. So now we have what the new civics will be doing in Stellaris First Contact. Each of these civics, in a lot of ways, is as flavorful as some of the origins we have elsewhere in the game. Now, the reason I say that, and you'll see why in a moment, is that they're basically much more tooled down versions of some of the new origins we're getting. They are in a lot of ways pre-FTL origins that are maybe even closer to what some of us had hoped for in terms of having some sort of pre-FTL style start. And I say that because these are not as narrative focused, they are simply, here are some effects, here are some abilities, go with it. So for this story pack, the devs were always on the lookout for flavorful and fun civics that they could add to further explore the themes of First Contact. It was thanks to a helpful comment from one of their betas that Alfred and Iggy started to investigate a generic low-tech civic. The aim was to add a civic that could be used in combination with other existing origins to get a pre-FTL feel. After brainstorming and fusing ideas, they came up with a low-tech Civic in which you start with reduced resources and a very limited and very different form of FTL travel. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the eager explorers and privatized exploration civics. Let's start with the regular Civic for regular empires. Yearning for the stars, this civilization sped through several stages of development, reaching the age of galactic exploration far earlier than most. Effects. Start with a technological and infrastructural disadvantage, and start with 10 fewer pops than normal. In essence, this is in a lot of ways the payback or challenging origin start. We also start with 2 exploration vessels and an engineering vessels. Those basically mean early science ships and simple construction ships. These are equipped with subspace drives, making them incapable of hyperlane travel. They do, however, have a limited jump drive capability. Gain an increased chance to discover voidcraft technology, gain 15% sublight speed, 20% survey speed, and 5% anomaly discovery chance. You cannot take inward perfection, payback, broken shackles, or fear of the dark, basically any of the new origins. You also cannot add or remove this after the start of the game. Let's look at the other one before I dive into how crazy and wild this is. The other one gives us basically the same things, those 2 exploration vessels, 1 engineering vessel, subspace drives, and no hyperlane travel ability. So you do not start with the regular hyperlane or FTL technology. You will start, though, if you take privatized exploration, with starhold technology and a starhold already built in your home system. That should make defense very, very easy. You also get starbase building speed for modules and buildings of plus 30%, starbase upgrade speed of plus 30%, and an extra 25% resources from all orbitals. Not only do we have those 2 civics for megacorp and regular biological empires, we also have 2 civics for hive minds and for machine empires. Alfred and Iggy wanted to challenge themselves since civics are often just identical for all government types, so they've made a unique one for each different government style. In the end, they implemented multiple civics that should be able to facilitate many fantasies and many builds. So for hives we have stargazers, again very similar start, minus 10 pops, reduced infrastructure and technology, 2 exploration vessels, engineering vessel, this special subspace drive, and I promise we'll get to what that means in a moment. Then they get the Stargazer trait, which is listed below, plus 25% pop growth from immigration, minus 25% resettlement cost, and plus 10% habitability. On top of that, you also begin with low intel about your starting cluster, plus 1 sensor range, ship hyperlane detection range of plus 2, and minus 20% starbase influence distance cost. So your starbases will be cheaper for influence. This Hivemind Civic actually seems like maybe it might be an interesting one to play in PvP. Then the exploration protocols for machines, again samey, but you gain 50% more insight progress from observing pre-FTL civilizations. You also gain unity every time you finish establishing First Contact. First Contact discovery speed plus 20%, and monthly unity from observation outposts plus 3 unity. I believe that's just plus 3 base, so nothing particularly amazing. Here we can see the starting info that the Stargazers get. They get information on systems at least 2 jumps away, I think possibly even 3 jumps away from the capital in the case of Seon up there. We can also see how far these subspace drives can take your ships. Now, I don't know if the subspace drive will give you a combat reduction, but let's assume for a moment that it doesn't, that operates in some ways like a mixture between the old wormhole and warp drive FTL technologies. This could be a really interesting way to play the game, specifically from a roleplay stance, but also actually from a regular stance. If you could end up building quite a strong build from one of these civics and managing to overcome the fact you have 10 less pops at the start of the game, possibly, I don't know, by going down the clone army origin start, maybe that would completely make up for it, then you could end up in a situation where you have a military capability that your opponents completely lack. However, you won't be able to use jump drives. It's wild and amazing that they're bringing back some of the old FTL styles, and I am very excited to have a go with this. As you can see from the image, the range is relatively far, only a few jumps, and you'd probably move the length of an early empire. So assuming there's still a cooldown on this, let's say it's a few hundred days, that means you could go top to bottom in an empire in just a few years, which would only be slower than hyperdrive if the hyperdrive was not snaking a circuitous path. And this also finally answers the question of what on earth were those funky ship designs that we saw very early on, not just on the Steam page, but in the initial announcement imagery. Those ships were the construction and science ships we get if we take these early alternative FTL Civics. And before we ask, yes, you can put these special subspace drives on all of your other ships. It's even something you will have to do if you want to get one of the new achievements, the path not taken, having 10 colonies without ever discovering hyperdrives. I really hope that is a Harry Turtledove reference, and if it is, I'm so happy. Wow, this new suite of civics is going to be really interesting and give us some very different gameplay options for Stellaris moving forwards. If you've enjoyed this video about Stellaris First Contact and you'd like to find out what happens if the pre-FTL primitives manage to throw off the yoke of an alien invasion, you'll want to know more about the new Origin Payback. If you'd like to know more about that Origin, click the video on screen now.